0.9%. Tax revenue outturn also stood at 103.77 billion Ghana cedis, or 6.5% of GDP, against a budgeted amount of 105.26 billion Ghana cedis, or 6.6% of GDP, thus registering a shortfall of 1.49 billion Ghana cedis. Non-tax revenue underperformed its targets by 2.63 billion Ghana cedis, standing at 12.27 billion against a target of 14.9 billion Ghana cedis. The shortfall in non-tax revenue was driven by significant underperformance of dividend, interest, profit from oil, whose outturn fell short of the target by 1.43 billion Ghana cedis, or as much as 37.1%, an outturn of 2.42 billion Ghana cedis against a target of 3.85 billion Ghana cedis. Foreign grants, which stood at 1.05 billion Ghana cedis in the first half of the year, was also short of a targeted amount of 1.07 billion Ghana cedis by 1.9%. However, other revenue, ESLA proceeds, whose outturn stood at 7.69 billion Ghana cedis in the first half of 2026, overperformed a target of 4.21 billion Ghana cedis by 3.49 billion Ghana cedis, or 45.3%. Total expenditure, including arrears, payments, and discrepancies, fell short of the target by as much as 35.6 billion Ghana cedis, or 20.6%, standing at 136.94 billion Ghana cedis against a budgeted amount of 172.754 billion. As a share of GDP, total government expenditure outturn stood at 8.6% against a target of 10.8%, according to the data provided by the government. In terms of percentages, arrears, clearance, and capital expenditure registered the biggest shortfall in outturns relative to their targets. Actual arrears clearance fell short of the budget target of 13.98 billion Ghana cedis, as high as 61.8%, standing at only 5.3 billion Ghana cedis during the first half of 2026. These numbers implies that the execution rate of arrears came to only 38.2% of the budget target. Capital expenditure outturn also fell short of target by as much as 14.38 billion Ghana cedis, or 39.3%, standing at 22.18 billion Ghana cedis against a budget of 36.5 billion Ghana cedis. Interest payment outturned in the first half of 2026 stood at 21.5 billion Ghana cedis against a target of 28.44 billion Ghana cedis, representing a shortfall of 6.94 billion Ghana cedis, or 24.4%. Grants to other government units also fell short of the target of 31.10 billion Ghana cedis by 15.7%, or 4.89 billion Ghana cedis, standing at 26.21 billion Ghana cedis in the first half of 2026. Compensation of employees, GHOne, stood at 42.9 billion Ghana cedis against a target of 45.38 billion Ghana cedis. This represents a shortfall of 2.48 billion Ghana cedis, or 5.5%. Given this drastic underspending, the outturn of overall fiscal deficit on commitment basis in the first half of 2026 drastically fell short of the budgeted amount by 25.59 billion Ghana cedis, or 79%, standing at only 6.82% billion against a target of 32.41 billion Ghana cedis. As a share of GDP, the outturn of the overall fiscal deficit on commitment basis was 0.8%, compared with a target of 2%. Also, the overall fiscal deficit on cash basis, including discrepancies, in the first half of 2026 stood at 12.17 billion, representing 0.8% of GDP, against a target of 46.39 billion Ghana cedis, representing 2.9% of GDP. Primary balance on commitment basis outstanding stood at a surplus of 14.68 billion Ghana cedis against a program deficit of 3.97 billion Ghana cedis. As a share of GDP, it stood at a surplus of 0.9% against a program deficit of 0.2%. On cash basis, the outturn of the primary balance moved to a surplus of 9.34 billion Ghana cedis, or 0.6% of GDP, against a program deficit of 17.95 billion Ghana cedis, or 1.1% of GDP. Now I move on to the review of the revised budget for the full budget year. In spite of the drastic reduction in the overall fiscal balances in the first half of 2026, reflecting the combined effect of 1.1% shortfall in total revenue and grants relative to its target, and the massive underspending during the period, thus 20.6% shortfall in total expenditure, most of the line items in the 2026 revised budget remain the same as in the original 2026 budget. Thus, virtually no noticeable revisions were made to them. On the revenue side in particular, no change was effected. The values for all the components of the tax and non-tax revenues remained unchanged. On the expenditure side, most lines also remain the same. The only exception were offsetting changes made to capital expenditure and what is termed other expenditure. In the case of other expenditure item, the total revenue was revised upward from 16.23 billion Ghana cedis to 21.23 billion Ghana cedi, with the additional amount of 5 billion allocated to Gold Board. a line item that was not included in the original budget. The value for the capital expenditure, on the other hand, has been revised downward from 57.53 billion Ghana cedis to 52.53 billion Ghana cedis, thus declining by 5 billion Ghana cedis and covering for the increase in the other expenditure items, that's the transfer to Gold Board. The specific reason given to the 5 billion allocation to Gold Board was the need for Gold Board to take full responsibility for gold purchase program, thereby relieving the Bank of Ghana of that responsibility. Because of the above, all the fiscal balances and their ratios of GDP, that's primary commitments and cash, in the revised 2026 budget remain the same as those in the original 2026 budget. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Ado. So Dr. Ado has taken us through what the Minister of Finance presented to the nation as the outturns for the budget in the first half of the year and what his revised plans are for the full year. Now, one recurring theme in the presentation was shortfall, fell short of. So take note of that as we now invite Dr. Said Boachi to give us the implications of shortfall. Thank you very much.
Good morning. And thank you very much, Leslie. And Dr. Ado, thank you. I had so many numbers. I mean, mentioning numbers, worrying is very difficult. And so, good job. Yeah, I'm going to take you through our analysis of the budget that he summarized a few minutes ago. The implementation of the 2026 budget in the first half of the year took place in a macroeconomic environment that remained relatively stable, despite the effect of the war in the Middle East on global energy prices. For example, despite increasing in recent months from 3.2% in March to 5.3% in June, year-on-year inflation has remained very low by historical standards. As a result, interest rates have continued to fall significantly in the first half of 2026. For instance, the 91-day Treasury bill rate, which decreased from 28% in December 2024 to 11.1% in December 2026, further decreased to 5.7% in June 2026. Also, the average lending rate, which dropped from 30.3% in December 2024 to 24.5% in December 2025, dropped further to 15.6% in June 2026. The decrease in interest rate is particularly a favorable development for the private sector, which has long hampered high cost of credit in Ghana. So the macroeconomic environment remained robust, and on that, the government has done very well. Additionally, the government's announcement in the mid-year review that the Ministry of Finance's new commitment authorization system intended to tighten expenditure control and check arrears accumulation will cover not just ministries, departments, and agencies, but will also cover state-owned enterprises. It's a welcome development. We previously commended the government for instituting the system, and we believe the inclusion of SOEs in its coverage is most appropriate. Indeed, the Minister of Finance was correct in his observation that SOEs' persistent financial failures have contributed significantly to Ghana's debt problems. We therefore endorse the efforts to rein in them financially. Despite the above positive points, the mid-year budget review has serious challenges. These are, number one, poor budget execution. The 2026 budget outturns in the first half of the year show that the budget is being poorly executed. While the government planned to spend 172.5 billion, including arrears payments, in the first half of the year, as stated earlier, as stated by Dr. Ado, its actual expenditure fell short by as much as 35.6 billion Ghana cedis, representing 20.6% of the budgeted amount. Again, as stated earlier, capital expenditure fell short by as much as 14.35 billion, representing 39.3% of the budgeted amount. And arrears payments fell short by 8.64 billion, representing a whopping 61.8% of the budgeted amount. It is important to point out that these two expenditure items are critical for economic growth and development: capital expenditure and arrears payment. They are critical for economic growth and development. Arrears payment, for instance, oils economic activities by providing liquidity to government contractors and suppliers and the businesses that depend on them. It is also important to understand that government expenditure, being a key component of GDP, has a direct declining effect on GDP growth when it is restricted. It is no wonder, therefore, that non-oil-rate GDP growth momentum declined in the first quarter of 2026, as this table shows. You can see from the table that although 6.3% growth rate in the first quarter of 2026 is quite good, if you compare it with the previous 4 quarters, it is noticeably low. Clearly, the sharp decline in government spending is at play here. If the government continues to significantly restrict government expenditure, as occurred in the first half of the year, then non-oil-rate GDP growth is most likely to decline further. So one may say, oh, the government is not spending and it is good for the deficit. Not spending has its own negative implication because, one, government expenditure is a big component, a key component of GDP. And if the government is not spending, it is falling short. It has implication. Of course, there are critical expenditure items too, like capital expenditure and arrears payment. If the government is not spending on them, it has further negative implication for GDP growth. Now, why did the government not spend as needed? While it is true that revenue mobilization and foreign borrowing for the budget financing fell short of their targets, these cannot fully explain the large expenditure shortfalls. In fact, the combined shortfall of total revenue and grants and foreign borrowing amounted to only 8.39 billion, which represents less than 1/4 of the total expenditure gap of 35.6 billion. Indeed, the huge shortfall in government spending is mostly attributable to large shortfall in domestic budget financing. Domestic financing of the budget fell short by as much as 34.45 billion, representing 67.2% of the budgeted amount. So the reason why the government couldn't spend as planned is that there was a big shortfall in domestic financing of 67.2 billion. Sorry, 67.2%. Why is it that the government couldn't borrow? Is it that because the government couldn't borrow to finance the budget, making domestic financing fall short by 67.2%? The answer is no. Whilst having the budget of domestic financing, the government was at the same time borrowing money to keep in the sinking fund. According to the Minister of Finance, 15.6 billion had been accumulated in the sinking fund by July 22, 2026, even though such a huge amount was not announced in the initial budget. The sinking fund of 15.6 billion was not budgeted for, but the government was spending money on it, depriving important expenditures like capital expenditure, arrears payment, and others of funding. This raises the following two questions. Was the government not aware while preparing the 2026 budget and setting its financing targets that it would raise such a large amount of money for the sinking fund? Or two, was it aware but chose not to capture this in the budget that it presented to Parliament? Whatever the case may be, it shows poor planning on the part of the government. This has greatly affected the credibility of the 2026 budget. The government should understand that a budget is not something to treat casually, such that the Minister of Finance can set targets that he willfully deviates from. This is because large deviations in budget execution have implications for growth, as discussed above. So when you make a plan, you have to follow it. You don't have to deviate. You plan to spend this much, but now you change your mind in the course of the year, and your financing is being directed towards a sinking fund accumulation. So that is point number one. Point number two, unrealistic targets and projections. The 2026 media budget revenue and GDP targets are not realistic. On revenue, the government has the total revenue and grants to GDP ratio target in the mid-year budget review at 16.8%, as mentioned earlier, which was argued to be unrealistic in our review of the 2026 budget statement. When the government brought the 2026 budget in November, you said 16.8% was unrealistic. Despite this, the government has kept it at 16.8% of GDP. We still maintain that this ratio is unrealistic. By maintaining the ratio, the government appears merely to be following the budgetary tradition in the country's recent history of over-projecting total revenue and grants to GDP ratio. In fact, since 2015, when it was able to hit 16.0%, total revenue and grants as a ratio of GDP has stayed below 16% mark till now. Yet, successive governments have repeatedly projected the ratio to be significantly above 60%. For instance, the table presents data on targets, that's initial budget target and mid-year target, and outturns of total revenue and grants since 2011. You can see from the table that initial budget total revenue and grants target for initial budget ranges from 16.2% to as high as 20%, with average standing at 17.4%. The mid-year budget, even though the government revises downward somewhat in some years, the average still stands at 16.5%. This has been the tradition. But what is the story of the actual outcomes? Always falling short of the 16% mark, but always projecting significantly above 16%. This is not good news. Now, in fact, in the face of this persistent underperformance, and despite not pursuing any significant revenue policies in the media budget, there is no justification for the government to maintain the total revenue and grants to GDP ratio target at 16.8%. Now on GDP, we said, the revenue target is unrealistic, GDP targets are unrealistic. We've talked about revenue. Now let's go to GDP. Despite evidence necessitating an upward revision to the projected real GDP growth rate of 2026, the government has kept it at 4.8% in the mid-year review. According to the government, this year GDP will grow at 4.8%. That is what they brought in the original budget, and they have maintained it. This indeed is unrealistic. This is because since this figure was initially projected in the 2026 budget last November, 2 sets of GDP data have been released that call for an upward adjustment in the GDP growth target. The first set of data show that the overall GDP growth rate for 2025 was 6.0%, significantly exceeding the 4.8% growth rate the government had projected for the year. The second set of data also show that year-on-year real GDP growth rate for the first quarter of 2026 was 6.4%, which also far exceeds the 4.8% projected growth rate for the whole year for the whole of this year. This development should have informed an increase in the projected real GDP growth rate for 2026 in the mid-year budget, as has been the practice. Yet, the government decided not to do so, thereby undermining the credibility of the projected GDP growth rate. Given that real GDP growth rate is underprojected, the nominal GDP target for 2026, which also remained unchanged in the mid-year review, is also underprojected and is thus unrealistic. This therefore means that the 16.8% provisional total revenue and grants to GDP ratio you talked about earlier is largely due to the underprojected GDP ratio, nominal GDP. Because nominal GDP is the denominator when you want to generate the total revenue and grants ratio. So if you underproject nominal GDP, it inflates the revenue ratio. Perhaps that's the reason why the government did not incorporate new data and make an adjustment in the nominal GDP number to make the total revenue and grants ratio artificially high. So, in fact, by the same reasoning, the total revenue and grants to GDP ratio outturn of 7.8% 8% for the first half of 2026 is also inflated. So these numbers are not realistic. Now, we have number 3, data inconsistencies. We have identified a number of data inconsistencies in the budget. There are a number of data inconsistencies in the mid-year budget, which also challenge its credibility. For instance, in Appendix 2A and Appendix 2B of the budget document, the stated total revenue and grants target for the first half of 2026 is 126.14 billion Ghana cedis, which gave rise to a shortfall of the total revenue and grants outturn of 1.37 billion as presented by Dr. Addo. Yet, the target for the individual components of total revenue and grants sum up to 125.4 billion instead of 126 billion. So the government has total revenue and grants line 126 billion. The various components have to sum up to 126 billion, but they sum up to 125 billion, which leaves an unexplained difference of 712 million. I thought the government uses an Excel framework, and they have to add up, but they don't add up. This discrepancy has implications for the actual shortfall in total revenue and grants in the first half of 2026. This is because if the 125 billion Ghana cedis instead of 126 billion was used as the total revenue and grants target, then the shortfall in total revenue and grants outturn for the first half of the year will have been 656 million instead of 1.37 billion. That's a huge difference. The government made a shortfall, and the Minister of Finance announced in Parliament there was a shortfall of 1.37 billion. Actually, if you add the components, the shortfall would have been 656 million. That's huge, a huge difference. We further note that social contributions, a traditional revenue line, is missing from these two appendices, even though it appears in the revised budget data for 2026. Social contribution is missing, but when you go to the revised budget, it appears. We suspect that this missing revenue line is responsible for this discrepancy. Another example of inconsistencies is that Appendix 2B contains two figures with substantial difference in value as start reference outlined in the first half of 2026. There is a bold line and there's a light line. Usually the light lines add up to the bold line. And if the light line is only one, then it is the same as the bold line. You know, the bold line, which is the smaller figure, is 1.59 billion, which is what the Ministry of Finance used to arrive at 124 billion as the total revenue and grants outturn for the first half of 2026. The bigger figure is 4.27. You know, the difference between 4.27 billion and 1.59 billion is huge. If this figure had been used, then total revenue and grants outturn for the first half of 2026 would have been much smaller at 122 billion, because tariff funds reduce total revenue and grants. The government used a smaller figure instead of the bigger figure. If the smaller figure had been, the bigger figure, which is light, had been used, the outturn will have been 122 billion, which is 2.68 billion less than the 124.78 billion the government used. The question is, why did the government state the larger tax refunds figure in the budget without using it for the calculation? It is interesting to point out that tax refunds outing stood at 5.07 billion in the first half of 2025. In the first half of 2025, tax refunds figure, of course, I've told you so, that it reduced to the value of total revenue and grant, stood at as high as 5.07 billion, which far exceeds even the bigger figure not used by the government to derive the total revenue and grants outing in the first half of the year. So the last year figure is even bigger than the bigger figure not used. What is going on here? And we know tax refunds reduce total revenue and grants. So that is about inconsistencies. Point number 4, lack of a strategy to generate fiscal revenue from the small-scale gold mining sector. The government did not articulate any strategy in the mid-year budget for mobilizing revenue from the small-scale gold mining sector, despite the critical need for it. Recent developments, in particular the implementation of the domestic gold purchase program and the establishment of Gold Board, have revealed that small-scale mining sector's contribution to gold production and export is much bigger than previously recognized. However, government revenue generation from the small-scale mining sector is woeful. As an example, in 2025, Ghana's gold export increased by a remarkable 103.3%, from 10.31 billion to 20.98 billion. That's more than double in 1 year. Of this, small-scale mining contributed as much as 10.8 billion, representing 51.5%. Previously, we thought small-scale mining sector consisted of 15%, 20% to 30%. Now, 2025, because the presence of the Gold Board, gold purchasing program, we've known that it is even bigger than the large-scale gold mining. Yet, mineral royalties collected by the government, for instance, which depend mostly entirely on gold production, improved by only 21%, while gold production export increased by 103%. Mineral royalty increased by only 21%, from 364 million in 2024 to 441 million in 2025. We're talking about export values of billion and mineral royalties of millions. Instructively, information published by the Minerals Income Investment Fund suggests that all the gold royalties collected in 2025 came from large-scale sector, even though the small-scale sector produced more and exported more than the large-scale sector. All the royalties collected from the gold sector came from large-scale, with no collection from the small-scale, despite each constituting 51.5%. This is what largely explains the significantly small growth rate of mineral royalties relative to the growth rate of gold export in 2025. Additionally, information obtained from IFS inquiries into this matter shows that besides royalties, other key revenue instruments in the current mining fiscal regime, such as corporate income tax, yield little to no revenue from the small-scale mining sector. Allowing such a situation to persist means the government is not interested in ensuring that growth in gold export generates anything close to commensurate growth in fiscal revenue from the sector. So these are the four shortfalls. These are the four weaknesses that we identified in the mid-year. So let's move to recommendations. 1, improve budget execution by spending in accordance with the budget plan. As discussed earlier, the considerable underspending in the first half of 2026 relative to budget plan not only undermined the budget's credibility, but more importantly, it also left much to be desired in terms of growth and development of the country. The government should therefore ensure that approved expenditures are fully implemented as budgeted, except when genuine revenue and financing constraints prevent this. It is therefore regrettable that the government ignored the financing plan in the budget during the first half of 2026 by accumulating resources in the sinking fund, something that had not been planned for, creating complications for spending on important items like capital expenditure and arrears payment. Going forward, the government should ensure that financing decisions are consistent with the budget plan. 2, make forecasting more evidence-based. We have demonstrated that nominal GDP, real GDP growth rate, and total revenue and grants to GDP ratio targets for the 2026 are unrealistic. These weaken the credibility of the budget. To address this, the government should ensure that its macroeconomic and fiscal projections are fully informed by all the available evidence. In particular, GDP projections should be updated when new data point to a materially different outlook than previously envisaged. This will help the government set more realistic fiscal targets, then enable better planning and strengthen confidence in the budget. It is important to point out that to improve reliability of budget forecast, the government can subject its forecast to independent review before incorporating them into the budget. Point number 3, recommendation 3, devise a strategy to generate revenue from the small-scale gold mining sector. To strengthen revenue mobilization, the government needs to devise a strategy for generating revenue from the rapidly expanding small-scale gold mining sector. As we showed in the paper, the remarkable growth in gold production and export by the small-scale mining sector has not led to any significant growth in revenue, since the government has ignored revenue mobilization from the sector. This situation should not be allowed to persist. The government should understand that Ghana's mineral resources are publicly endowed and held in trust by the state on behalf of the people. Therefore, it is necessary that the state enjoys a fair share of the benefits from extraction of these mineral resources by whoever extracts it. Then finally, ensure the consistency and reliability of fiscal data. The Ministry of Finance should ensure that fiscal data go through robust validation and verification processes before incorporating them into the budget statement in order to eliminate data inconsistencies. Doing so will help improve the reliability of the fiscal data contained in the country's budget. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boakye, for your energetic presentation of the Institute's analysis of the mid-year budget review. I should like also to introduce Professor William Rafun-Seidu, who's a research fellow of the Institute and who's joined us here this morning. Okay, Friends, we will now take your questions on our presentation. I believe we have told you something you haven't heard already in the assessments that have been done so far since the mid-year budget was presented. We certainly have drawn your attention to things you haven't heard so far in the debate. So I welcome your questions now. Where's the microphone? You have a question? He has a question. He's in the corner. So kindly say your name, your company.
Thank you. My name is Samuel Adoba. I work with TV Africa.
Samuel
Adoba.
TV Africa.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Looking at the presentation, I want to understand if government is performing or not, and also which particular sectors government is not performing very well, and which sectors is government doing well. And moving forward, looking at the recommendation 1, do you think government doing not well in terms of expending? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Shall I?
Yes.
Okay. Eben Sabuti here from Joy FM.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have two questions.
All
The
right.
first one has to do with the inconsistencies with the data. I just want to find out from Doc that even though we are no more under the IMF program, we've signed up to a different program, which is the PCI. So I just want to know, reporting inconsistencies in our data, is it going to have any effect on this program as a whole, as a nation? And that's first. And then secondly, with the expenditure lineup, I think government came out to say they are spending because they mentioned that they were doing big push, they were doing some other programs, 1 million coders and all that. I don't know which specific areas would you want government expenditure to be, more high moving into the year. Thank you.
Thank you too. Any further? Caleb has a question.
Calvin, GHOne TV. Yeah,
Calvin. Yeah, Calvin.
Yes, please.
Sorry.
So my question has to do with the data inconsistency as well. Despite the inconsistency, will that have any physical distraction to government performance?
Okay. There's a lot of interest in the inconsistencies, huh? Any Kingsley?
Okay, Kinsler, sorry, Ghanaian Times. So thank you for a very wonderful job done. But the question is, why now? It appears you have delayed when the interest has died down. This analysis should have come earlier because it's an exception, as you alluded to. So my question on the small scale gold mining sector, you gave some numbers, but I want to find out how much in a year do you think we can make? How can it boost government revenue projections?
How can we?
The small scale gold mining sector in a year, how can we, from your projections, how can we raise from the sector to boost government revenue?
Okay. Okay, so we'll answer, hold on to your questions. We'll answer these ones and then we'll come back to you. Okay, Doc.
Our friend from TV Africa is asking the question, despite the underspending, is the government performing or not? In which sector? As we began our analysis, the government is definitely performing on different areas. I mean, we said macroeconomic environment remains stable, and we gave credit to the government on that. Checks and balances the government is putting in place. We commended the government. But not following expenditure plan is not a good thing. I mean, the budget is a very serious document that should not be toyed with. Investors and other stakeholders take what is in the budget and they plan. So if you plan to spend this much and you don't spend because you want to use, in the course of the year, you develop new ideas, that's not a good sign. That's definitely not a good sign. It means next year, your budget plan may not be taken seriously. And it will not only affect the government planning, but it can affect planning by stakeholders. So the government has to stick to its plan. In fact, we understand that in the course of the year, certain things may be beyond the government. You cannot raise the revenue as planned. You couldn't borrow. Like last year, you saw that the government planned to borrow from foreign sources and it couldn't. That one is understandable. But you have your plan and you have the ability to fulfill the plan. But then you direct the funding to something else. And especially, and more importantly, those items you do not spend on has growth and development implications. I think I'm clear on that. Saboti. Does the inconsistency affect PCI? Of course, IMF wouldn't be happy if there are inconsistencies. Ghanaians also wouldn't be happy. Businesses wouldn't be happy. Everybody wouldn't be happy. It is not the PCI alone. Inconsistencies are serious issues. Like I said, you use the framework of Microsoft Excel. It's supposed to balance automatically. What is happening? What is happening? We could not explain it. So inconsistency should be avoided. If you're a school teacher and your students' math calculation has inconsistencies, I'm not sure you award the mark. So it is important. So which particular expenditure is the government not spending on? Almost all expenditures. But you identified capital expenditure and arrears payments. They are critical because contractors have done work for you and they are to be paid. If they are paid, then they will be encouraged to do more work for you. If you are not paying them, what do they do? Projects cannot be delivered on time. Capital expenditure is critical. We have not been spending on capital items or investment items enough. Last year, we were happy that the government budgeted so much. But then we decided not to spend on them. Getting to 40% of the money planned to be released for capital expenditure in the first quarter, in the first half of 2026, was not released. That's not good. It has growth implications, as we demonstrated. There is evidence of that going on. That's why I told you we were happy that capital expenditure projection was good enough. It was okay, I should say. But then you planned that you were going to spend it on it, and you didn't. What is going on? and you are recognizing that, it is not because you didn't get enough revenue. But because you decided to borrow for something else that you didn't plan for. That's not good. Will inconsistencies have physical distraction? Did you mean fiscal or physical distraction to government performance? I've answered the question. If your student math has so many inconsistencies, you wouldn't like it. And, everybody is looking into the budget for planning. If they don't have confidence in the budget, next year they will not even listen to it. Because this budget is nothing. It doesn't mean much. You want things to be, not perfect, but as good as you can get it to be. Somebody questioned us why the delay. You did? In fact, because it is a good analysis in its time. You don't want to rush and say anything. It needs a critical review, examination of what is going on. And for your information, our timelines have not changed. And they seem to be too long for you. Our timelines have not changed. And maybe the best we have ever done is 2 weeks after the budget. But 3 weeks is quite standard for us because we take our time to do a good job. In fact, it's a warashi akuti. So you don't want to do that. You see, the same questioner said, how can we raise revenue from the small-scale sector? Previously, the understanding was that we didn't have much information about them. It is informal. And if it is informal, you can't see what is going on. They were exporting gold and the government was not seeing it. But now, with the emergence of Gold Board, Gold Purchase Program, everything is clear and lucid. Are you letting them to go scot-free? Whereby they are mining publicly endowed resources. The government has to be serious. It is unbelievable that gold export and production from small-scale mining is even bigger than large-scale mining. Previously, we were having 20%, at most 30%, 15%. Now, 51.5%, and allow them to go scot-free, whereby the government is finding it difficult to raise revenue. We said revenue target of 16.8 is not realistic. It's sad that we are saying it is not realistic because African average is 20.5. You say 16.5 is too much, not realistic, because historically the government has not been able to hit 16.0. Now it says 16.8. Whether it is realistic or not, it is too small. African average is 20.5, and middle income average is 22% of GDP, and our average is below 16%. 16%. You want to be able to collect revenue, and especially I'm enthused. I'm very enthused about collecting revenue from gold miners because those are publicly endowed resources. It is not somebody's manufacturing that he has bought a piece of land, bought equipment and others. You are going after it. But the resources in the ground that are supposed to be for, the public, you are letting it go scot-free. I think it is a serious issue.
Thank you very much, Doc. Interestingly, with what we know about export performance for 2025, it's now clear that no sector of the economy generates more export revenue than the small-scale mining sector. No sector of the economy. Because now they even beat the large-scale sector. The oil sector generates about $3 billion. Cocoa, about $2 billion. Right? And we know the troubles with, sorting out the cocoa farmers. So this is a leading sector, actually, for export income in Ghana. So I leave you to ponder this fact. Okay, there were two hands here. Oh, Kingsley, you have another question.
Yeah.
Kingsley, you're burning with questions today.
Sure. So I want to find out, government borrowing to fund the sinking fund, do you see it as a threat? And is it going to exacerbate our debt situation going forward, maybe after 2027? And do you see that as robbing Peter to pay Paul? And what will be the implications for us going forward? And my second question, so if IFS were the managers of the economy, what would you have done differently? Thank you.
Okay, you have to vote for us first.
Yes, Issa Mohammed. Issa Mohammed from the Ghana News Agency. My question has to do with the data inconsistency being raised here. We would recall under the previous government, similar issue occurred, which this was one of the reasons why the then Minister of Finance was to be impeached by the minority, which was championed by the minority. The excuse then was that it has to do with the accounting treatment being used. A line item, whether it's basically based on the accounting principle. And by doing this, you had international partners receiving different sets of data, while our parliament or locally, there are different sets of data. So looking at this situation now, would you say it's an accounting issue or there's more to it from where you sit? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. My name is Salom.
Salom.
Yes, Salom.
Okay.
From the News Center.
News Center.
Yes. Following the media budget presentation, Dr. Atuforson went on the media run where he explained that his biggest headache is his debt obligations for next year and 2028, right, 2027, 2028. And he mentioned a figure of 111 billion Ghana cedis, right? So I ask, regarding the sinking fund and our debt obligations, is it not better that we remain prudent, underspend, and have something in our pockets for when the debts fall due, than to go on a spending spree today and then find ourselves wanting tomorrow?
Okay. Thank you for your questions, Salom. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm Isaac Adu from the High Street Journal. Issues about inconsistencies is worrying, and rightfully so that you point them out. Budget preparation, I believe, is a serious exercise. And I want to believe that the ministry does engagement with CSOs and others before pre-budget and then post-budget. I don't know how well you are part of that engagement so you can make sound inputs into these numbers. As you mentioned, it's a serious thing or oversight that cannot be glossed over. Beyond this pressure, is there any effort to engage the ministry over this? It's a serious matter. It cannot be wished away. It can't also be that possibly it's a template that is there and so they feed in the numbers and that's it. No. So that's my concern. Secondly, this thing about gold, and the fact that the economy is depending more on gold. And I did hear the Ghana Statistical Service boss expressing worry over the fact that it appears we are depending largely on gold. And when it happens like that and something hits gold, then we are coming down crashing. What's your reaction to that? What's your take on our inability to diversify properly? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take one more from, that's Joshua, eh? Okay.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Nicho Ebia from the New Finder newspaper. I think one of the things that has been said, New Finder. Yes. One of the things that has been said is that government fell short in terms of raising revenue and even their foreign financing targets. My question is that if the government had spent the full budgeted amount, that couldn't, wouldn't that create another issue in terms of our fiscal space? And so was the expenditure shortfall actually a consequence of government being unable to finance the budget? That's my question.
Okay, I'll take one more from Joshua, I believe, and then we'll take the answers. Yes.
Okay, so my name is Joshua Wallace Emlanu with BNFT. So the first question has to do with the sinking fund and then the debt ward approach from 2027 to 2028 that we would have to sort out. The allocation made in the sinking fund, is it enough from your perspective in terms of your analysis? Is it enough with regards to, given that we have our 111 billion to sort out during this 2-year period? And also, where do you see possibly government, in the media budget, government mentioned that they were seeking a fiscal space in terms of the primary surplus was going to be reduced to 0.5. In that case, do you see government shifting that space that's been created to partly clearing off some of the debt? Because since that space is being created, possibly that's an avenue they could use. Do you see that happening? My third one would be that, and also on the back of this, the primary surplus, is it okay for us to reduce it that hugely in terms of from 1.5 to 0.5? That's what I'm asking for now.
Okay. So we'll answer. Okay, Doc.
Looks like the questions are similar on the sinking fund. Kingsley is asking, is borrowing for the sinking fund a bad thing? In fact, it is a good thing. It is a good thing. You don't have to wait until your debt is due and you are struggling to find another debt to settle the debt, to rob Peter to pay Paul. So it is good to plan. But the planning has to be correct. You don't plan to spend this amount of money, to pay contractors, build infrastructure and others. Then in the middle of in the course of time, while you are implementing this, you say, what about the sinking fund? So it is better planning we are talking about. If you have sinking fund to spend on, put it into your plan at the start of the year so that, you balance between spending on infrastructure and other things and putting money into the sinking fund. What should I do? Then you design a better plan. For instance, if indeed they had planned to, keep money into the sinking fund, they will have perhaps thought of other sources of revenue. But because, you need to pay arrears, we need to spend on infrastructure, we need to pay our workers. But at the same time, this sinking fund thing is also bothering us. What should we do? Ghana's revenue to GDP ratio, it is too small. What is going on? It will stimulate you to raise more revenue and others. But, relaxing and doing poor planning is not the way to go. I wish you got my point, eh? You say, what would IFS have done? I mean, I just told you what you would have done. Let's say you want to get power first. No, we don't want any power. We don't want any power. IFS doesn't want power because there could be another meaning to that. So let's. So data inconsistency, is this an issue or not? Is it accounting issue? I don't want to read too much to it. If I'm not careful, I will say certain things I'm not supposed to say. At times, games are played with the numbers. That's what I can say. Games are played with the numbers. That's what I can say. And if I'm not careful, if you're playing so much games, you forget that, to close some loophole somewhere. I'm not supposed to say this, but you're pushing me to say it. You push me. If the government gets my tail, I say, you push me to say that. It is not the result of a change in accounting treatment. Inti, with the man's why? Cell says the sinking fund, is it not better to underspend and save for the sinking fund? These are two important things. For now, spending to grow the economy is critical. Perhaps even if you grow the economy, you'll be able to have money to pay your debt in the future. But saving money in the sinking fund is also important. So better planning, better planning, better planning. What we are talking about is hijacking your spending arrangement, your spending plan in the middle of the flight and changing the course. It doesn't bode well for you. So you raise two questions. Was the government not aware that it would need to keep money in the sinking fund when it was planning the budget? Or it was aware, but it failed to. It decided not to do that. Whatever the case may be, it's not a good thing. Beatty says the minister engages CSOs. Are you not part of it? You are part of it. But the engagement is on different level, not the nitty-gritty of the budget, about policy, direction, and others. We don't get close to budget plan. Of course, I've worked at the Ministry of Finance before. I think many of you are aware I was an advisor, and I was directly involved in the budget planning. But CSOs and other agencies are not allowed to come close until the budget is ready. But then could ask CSOs to bring their policies. He said, are you not depending on too much on gold? In fact, the truth of the matter is that you don't have any gold, much gold to depend on. You have so much gold, but you don't depend on it so much. Why? The revenues coming from gold is not enough. We at IFS have been talking about this for too long. 20 billion worth of gold exported. How much did the country make? Less than 1.5 billion. Make half. And if you are exceeding more than half, say you can raise the issue that now you are depending too much on it. You don't have much to depend on. Especially the 10.8 billion component of the export, virtually nil. Virtually. So don't tell me that you are depending too much on gold. You don't have much to depend on. And it is sad. Add oil to gold. About 4 billion of oil exported. 20.8, around 25 billion. Make half of it. Will Ghana have revenue difficulties like we are having? And you want money into the sinking fund? Plan very well to raise revenue. Will spending full amount have created an issue? By the friend from New Finder. You see, the budget deficit to begin with was good. You know, looking at historical standards, the deficit registered in the country. So we didn't have issue with the deficit ratio the government put in the 2026 budget. But because the government didn't spend, the deficit ratio is so low. If it is because of issues, as I've said, no problem. But hijacking it and putting the money into the sinking fund that you did not plan for, it's not good. Because, the deficit to begin with was not a problem. Now it is so low, if people don't have eyes to see, they say, oh, the deficit is low and it is good thing. No. Those of us who have eyes to see is that it was not high to begin with, and the lowness is not because of the government is doing well, it's because the government is way out of its plan. And for that matter, there is shortage of spending somewhere, critically, which has the potential to push down a GDP growth. So if you want to keep money into the sinking fund and others, plan for it very well. Maybe it may call for, as I've said already, raising revenue again. Hey, this sinking fund thing. Joshua, you're still on sinking fund. The allocation to the sinking fund, is it enough? Perhaps it is not enough, and the government is struggling. And that's why you have to cut your coat according to your size. The borrowing is too much. I hope this thing will serve as a lesson so that we minimize the level of borrowing and plan our expenditures according to what we have, so that in the course of in the year, you wouldn't have to change course and create confusion that has implication for growth. I cannot tell you that the monies in the sinking fund is enough. But usually, it is a good thing. In fact, to begin with, it is a good thing because usually the government of Ghana will sit down until the debt matures and they'll be struggling to borrow. Perhaps they have seen that going to the international bond market is not so easy. That's why they are rushing. So putting money into the sinking fund is good. But plan for it. Do better planning. That's all. budget space created. You know, artificially, you think that budget space has been created because the deficit is low. But borrowing is borrowing. Borrowing and keeping it into the second fund and borrowing to spend in the budget is still borrowing. So why artificially you will see that the budget space has been created because the deficit is low, the government has still borrowed. And interest will yield on that. And so, I mean, talking about budget space being created is neither here nor there. Thank you.
Are we good? Okay, I'll take a final round. I'll take a final round. I hope we are done with the sinking fund questions. Okay, Sabute, who has the mic? Yeah, Fred, Sabute, then you in the corner. So two or... Okay, so we'll take...
Okay, so Sabute again, yes. I want to hear the IFS's analysis on the BOG's market intervention. I think in the last few days, we have reported that so far about $10 billion have been injected into the market to help stabilize the local currency. I want to hear the analysis of the IFS on this. And then also with the government's 2 cedis cushioning of diesel consumers, we all know that there are issues with the crude prices in the international market, and government has decided to kind of subsidize or take out some 2 cedis for diesel consumers. We are yet to find out where this shortfall, the source of fund to cater for this shortfall. I want to hear the IFS's analysis on these two. Thank you. So government is cushioning diesel consumers with some 2 cedis reduction. So I just want to hear your analysis of that. They've not indicated to us where they are going to get the money to take care of this shortfall yet. But we know definitely it's going to affect petroleum taxes. So I just want to hear from you on that. These two. Thank you.
Okay. Because I said no more sinking fund. Now you're taking us away from it. Okay, so the final question, You're from TV Africa, right?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Authorities in government says government may not go to IMF. And looking at how government also spending.
Government may not go to IMF.
IMF.
But we're still there.
Yeah. That's my question.
Okay.
And looking at how government is spending and also still borrowing, do you think in future government may still go to IMF? And what do you think it will lead government to IMF?
What do we think will lead the government to the IMF? Okay. So, on that thought-provoking note, Dr. Said Boachi.
The government's intervention in the exchange rate market, questioned by Sabote. In Ghana here, the exchange rate market is what they call managed float. It is not a completely floating system. So, because the Bank of Ghana receives a very big chunk of foreign exchange. If you go to other countries, banks receive them because it is more liberal. Because of that, the Bank of Ghana has to intervene. So its intervention, for the benefit of the doubt, I would say it is a well-managed one. And so it's a good thing. We haven't been able to reach a level whereby there's a complete floating exchange rate flexibility. So here and there, the government, the central bank has to intervene. So if they are intervening, it's a good thing. Until we are able to reach there. Pushing diesel consumers. These are some of the policies that gets us into trouble. there's a war going on. If the government is having some save money sitting down free to use to pushing people, I say no problem. But if this is coming from borrowing, you know that revenue is not enough. It's not good because most often these policies are informed by politics. They are politically motivated. If it's a genuine economic issue, they have considered fine, but usually it is politically motivated. And it creates troubles for us. Everybody understands that the war going on is not the making of Ghanaians. So you should all be prepared, to handle it. Government is in trouble. No, you are asking questions. I said you shouldn't bring it, but I'm bringing it. Keeping money into the sinking fund. And to pay for our debt, and it is not even enough. Ghanaians have to be made to cover some of these things, except that the government has, cool money sitting down somewhere he wants to help. Other than that, if it is has political motivation, is not a good thing, and most often it has. What will make government go back to the IMF? One, not being able to generate revenue. And two, being careless with your spending. That's all. Politically motivated spending, which has little return economically, which does not grow the economy. These are what will make you go back. And somebody asked a question, is the government doing well? I don't want to answer that. Where the government is doing well, we have praised them, the government. Where it is not doing well, we have said it. If not now, but the government, he said the government is already with the IMF, but not on financial basis. It may not be long.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Boakye. And let me also thank you, my friends, for your very good questions. I believe, Dr. Boakye, you agree with me that they have asked very good questions, very tough questions, some that could invite trouble if you don't answer carefully. The guy wants to know when, as if we have a date for our next crisis-driven turn to the IMF. Anyway, you can go through the history charts. Just look at the country since independence, and then work out, how often do we go there, and then do your own projections. We don't know about that. But, of course, we hope that this time will be different. That should be our collective prayer as Ghanaians, that we learn a lesson from our historical experiences, including the recent one, and we all behave differently. On that note, thank you very much, guys, for coming. Thank you, two colleagues.
Uthman, coming up in this bulletin. Attorney General files fresh stay of execution application at the Supreme Court against former Maslog boss Sedina Tamaklo's acquittal after withdrawal of the application from the Court of Appeal. Also, one dead while 5 persons are in a critical condition following a head-on collision at Asubo on the Accra-Kumasi Highway. And later, Minister for Government Communications Felix Kwache describes calls for convicted Ashanti Regional Chairman Bernard Boesiako to apologize to President John Dramani Mahama for clemency as misplaced.
The president doesn't even know the people personally. He only gets a list and he's told that this and that person has been of good behavior, he's shown remorse, so give him another chance. Yeah. And then he goes through lawful processes to do that. So it's not that anybody can commit an offense and when the law catches up and they are convicted, then they come to the president to plead. I don't think that we can, it's not a sustainable approach.
In business, IFS says 2026 mid-year budget review has no clear strategy to generate revenue from the small-scale gold mining sector. On the international front, at least 15 persons have died after a boat sank in Zimbabwe's Lake Kariba. We have the details. Stay with us. Many thanks for your company once again. Remember, this bulletin is streaming live on all our social media platforms at GHOne TV. Now, the Attorney General has filed a fresh stay of execution application to the Supreme Court against the acquittal of former Maslog boss Sedina Tamaklo after withdrawal from the Court of Appeal. A while ago, a 3-member panel of the Court of Appeal struck out the Attorney General's application for stay of execution in Sedina Tamaklo's acquittal. This was after the prosecution, led by Hilda Craig, a principal state attorney, withdrew the application on Wednesday, August 12, 2026. The panel of 3 presided over by Justice Sophia Rosetta Essa, while striking out the application as withdrawn, said they had a warrant from the Chief Justice to sit on the matter to deliver their ruling. Sydney Antonio is the counsel for acquitted Maslog boss Sedina Tamaklo and has been reacting to this development.
Was on the mood because, in our opinion, arguments have been advanced for and against the motion, and today's date was given by the court for the court to deliver its ruling. And we just served yesterday with the notice of withdrawal. We believed that the proper thing should have been for the Attorney General to have sought leave of the court before going ahead and withdraw, because today's business was for the delivery of the ruling, and that should have gone on today, if not for their motion. So that was our position. But as you heard in court, for the substance of it, we're not opposed to the motion in itself or to the withdrawal in itself, but just for that little proviso so that we believed leave should have been sought before proceeding with it. We have not been served formally with any such motion, but as you have heard, I've also heard, but we have not been served with any such motion formally, so I cannot speak to it. As we informed you on the day the judgment was delivered, we were beginning the administrative processes for it to be released. So we have done that and we are waiting. You know, wheels of justice, they move on their own speed and their own pace sometimes. So we are waiting to receive the necessary processes to proceed with her release. But we are working on it, and we are strongly believing that soon she'll be out with us. No, we have not had conference with her, you know, the situation in the prisons. But, I mean, we know that what we are doing is for her interest, and she also believes that what we are doing is for her ultimate interest and for ultimate release. So we are on the same page when it comes to the substance of what we are doing.
Let's stay a while longer on this development and engage our legal affairs correspondent, Mutala Inusa. Mutala, many thanks for joining us. Help us understand, why did the AG withdraw from the Court of Appeal and go directly to the Supreme Court?
So, like you really pointed this morning, the state prosecutors led by Hilda Craig, principal state attorney, came to the Court of Appeal. And you know we are still in the vacation, the 3-member Court of Appeal, essentially to withdraw that application that they had moved on the 31st of July, the very last day of the legal year. And the Court of Appeal makes the point that because they couldn't take a decision, they were adjourning to indefinitely, and also to await a warrant from the Chief Justice if they are to sit within the course of the legal vacation and then deliver their ruling. So today essentially is the day that the Court of Appeal had the warrant to sit on this particular case. Now, just before they could proceed to deliver their ruling, Hilda Craig indicated that on the 10th of August, that was Monday, they filed a notice of withdrawal to withdraw this particular application that they were seeking for a stay of execution. Essentially, once that have been brought to the attention of the court, it means that the application doesn't exist because the person who brought the application says that I no longer want to pursue it. Lawyers for Sedna Tamaklo, as already heard, and Sydney Atonu make the point that they do not immediately oppose, or they do not oppose to the request of the withdrawal. So consequently, the panel chaired by Sophia Rosetta Benasco Essa strike it out as withdrawn. But the understanding is that the Attorney General has rather moved to the Supreme Court, has filed a stay of execution at the Supreme Court, and the notice of appeal challenging the Court of Appeal decision to acquit all of them at the Supreme Court. It is the reason they come to the Court of Appeal, the second highest court of the land, to say that we have gone to the Supreme Court. We want to withdraw the action here and pursue the one that we have filed at the Apex Court. So essentially, that is the reason that we have as to why they have withdrawn the one at the Court of Appeal and now have decided to pursue it at the Supreme Court.
But what does this mean for Sedina's case?
So as we speak, once there's no express order from the court above, from the Supreme Court anywhere, the Court of Appeal decision stands. Sedina Tamaklo is acquitted and discharged. And as we speak, there's nothing that holds her as somebody who has a criminal record on her neck. So she is free to go. And once she has a warrant that she should be discharged, she's free to go as far as this particular process is concerned, except when there's an express order that the decision taken by the Court of Appeal has to be paid. That has not been paid at all. So Sedina Tamaklo, as we speak, should be walking free.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. That was our legal affairs correspondent, Mutala Inusa, bringing us updates from the court with regard to Sedina Tamaklo's case. But let's get the legal perspective on what just transpired in court. Kwame Usudanso is a private legal practitioner and joins us via Zoom for a conversation on this matter. Kwame, many thanks for joining us. If Sedina has been acquitted and discharged by the Court of Appeal, on what legal basis can the state keep her in prison while asking the Supreme Court to stay that acquittal?
Well, so once somebody has been incarcerated, the presumption is that decision stays until there's any contrary application to court to vary that. In this case, the Attorney General is praying for a stay of execution, which essentially means that the decision that was reached by the lower court is being challenged. And yes, there's such a process which can be triggered if, in the view of the Attorney General, that ruling by the Court of Appeal is one that, in their view, is erroneous, and so they are at liberty to do that. However, a determination ought to be made whether or not to uphold that particular application, or that the ruling by the lower court should still stand. As we speak today, that determination has not been made, which is why it appears the defense attorney is a little, worried that today was supposed to be the hearing day. Today was supposed to be the day where the court will make a determination on the application for stay of execution. And only for them to be, told in court. I think they said they were served yesterday or so that the state had decided to withdraw the matter and rather go to the Supreme Court in relation to the stay of execution. So that's where we are now. These are procedures which are known to the jurisprudence, and so there's no violation here. These are processes that are allowed and can be explored by any party at all.
But Kwame, does filing a stay application now at the Supreme Court automatically suspend the effect of the Court of Appeal's decision?
These are legal matters which ought to be dealt with. There are others who say that, well, an application on its own should mean that the earlier decision be halted. Others are also saying that to the extent that the court has not made any pronouncement on that application, it means that the lower court's decision stands. So these are competing arguments which can be advanced depending on where you stand. I will err on the side of the position that once an application has been made, we should await the determination of the court before any such pronouncements will be made relative to whether or not the withdrawal and acquittal should stand. Because the court has to make a pronouncement. If the court has not made any pronouncement on the application, it means that the application on its own should not lead to a variation in a ruling or a decision by a lower court. I'm not of that school of thought. I'm of the school of thought that the decision by the lower court must stay. And so she's acquitted until the court makes a final determination whether or not there was any error in the determination that was made by the lower court in respect of this matter.
Kwame, you did mention that these are legal matters, but that has not prevented the general public from commenting on these legal issues. And a lot of people have had cause to talk about the AG and sort of the modus operandi he's using in this particular case. I don't know if you'd like to comment on that.
Well, to the extent that all of us voted for a president, to the extent that the president in his wisdom found it expedient to appoint this particular attorney general, to the extent that the attorney general is exercising his powers or its powers on behalf of the good people of Ghana, one would want to be very circumspect in making certain pronouncements. It is my firm belief that whatever it is that the AG is doing is in the interest of justice. We must not hurry justice just for the satisfaction of political opponents or for anybody who thinks that justice must be delivered to their satisfaction. I believe that the AG knows exactly what it is he's doing, and that legal matters must be dealt with from legal perspective. Of course, sometimes we can be emotional about certain things, but it's important that we don't mix emotions with law. You would find yourself in hot waters if you did that. And so let the laws work. Let's ensure that we continuously put the feet of the AG to the fire of accountability. In the final analysis, I believe that once they have availed themselves to public criticisms and scrutiny and accountability, particularly with their consistent appearance at the Flagstaff, the seat of government, to account to the good people of Ghana through the Government Accountability Series. I think that they have been very transparent with the good people of Ghana, and whatever it is that they are doing will not be inimical to the forward march of Ghana and the general dispensation of justice in Ghana.
All right,
bear in mind that, bear in mind that it is evident that if you read the judgment of the Court of Appeal, if that is anything to go by, there are a lot of loopholes in the former AG's work, which led to the discharge and acquittal of said Natamaklu. I don't want
the former deputy AG has disputed that. When this whole thing first started.
The beauty about law is the existence of competing arguments. Your argument may be incompatible with mine. The determination of whether or not your argument should hold water is made by the court. The court has, so we can all advance arguments and think that our case is, in terms of evidence, even weightier, right? But the court will take a different view, and that is what it should be. Everybody who goes to court would wish to win, right? And every accused person would wish that they are discharged and acquitted. And so if the court listens to these competing arguments and comes to the conclusion that the prosecution's argument holds water or that the defense attorney's argument holds water, then so be it. I don't want us to proceed on this trajectory of emotions elicited by reason of satisfying the whims and caprices of persons who may not necessarily be, best judges of what the judicial system should be. So I think that the AG, if they have, and that is what they are seeking to do, that there are different avenues for redress. If they are displeased about the decision by the court, it is not a matter of making public or necessary public pronouncement. They have to go to court and argue their point out or argue their case out. That's just what it is.
Okay. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on Newsroom. That was private legal practitioner Kwame Owusu-Danso. But you out there have also been reacting to this development on our social media platforms, and Amakwa is bringing us those.
Yes, I mean, even as I'm standing here, the comments are still coming. We have Danny Owusu. Vengeance belongs to God Almighty. Chairman Wuntumi, may God continue his strength and wisdom on you wherever you are. And this too, he says, shall pass. King Berry, it don't reach inside. The system is actually working irrespective of who you are. We have Tinkran, well orchestrated. He asks, what's the episode? We have John. I'm happy our judicial system is alive and kicking again. Let's not get politics into everything. We want Ghana to be a better place for us all. Salifu Lukman, old movie. Then we have Bernard Chirimatin. Ghana is working again. Sensible Ghanaians have trust in court now. We also have Nana Ofori. These people think they are smart. Boy, everybody knew the outcome before today. We have Solomon. You guys should continue to joke with our minds. Felix says it's settings. Or Dennis Ajay. Ghana is really working again as rule of law is at work. He says the law is the law. King Selom, this is good. We also have Adeko Ano. Everything you do in this world, people will talk about it. Dinak Ventures, real definition of settings. Ibrahim says we should allow the woman. We also have Amos Duku. All be charade and propaganda. Prince says, I knew it was a game. Another Prince, Kobe, this no be news. We already knew a day like this will come. We also have good luck. This is fan fooling. Denyasa, hey, Mahama. Kojo Francis, we weren't expecting anything new. We have Barnabas, I said it. Immediately the Court of Appeal quashed the conviction. There's nothing to be stayed pending appeal. Keeping a convicted person in custody after his conviction has been quashed, breached his fundamental human rights. We have our last couple of comments here. Hardy, it's finished. Then we also have Sadat, settings government with a good format. Can you imagine we're in a legal vacation and the legal system is blowing up? Well, let's see what happens moving forward. My name is Nadima. Nadima, back to you.
Thank you for bringing us those thoughts from our social media platforms. But let's still talk about judicial matters and the legal vacation. As NPP's communications team member, Kemi Musa, says despite legal vacation being an established part of the judiciary's calendar, the current occurrences raise serious concerns. She argues that the focus should be on whether the 2-month break allows urgent cases to be received timely, particularly where access to justice, they say, is at stake.
Out of the judicial calendar, we've known that. And it's not in dispute that even during legal vacations, there is they make up for the gap with vacation courts.
Exactly.
You understand? So it's not that, we are not saying that this is something new or something that has never been done. But then it is the circumstances surrounding these issues. Now, let me just say that for me, I'm going to premise my submissions based on the letter that the Ghana Bar Association issued, because I agree with all the points they raised. So for Irubuahene, that Samuel Atachia, yesterday, I think after the issue came up, some media platforms got him, interviewed him. And of course, he registered his displeasure at the way in which the matter was being handled. Or let me reiterate the fact that the Ghana Bar Association in itself is that one body that deals with matters involving lawyers in the country. You understand? They do their very best to promote professionalism and ethical standards. So for them to issue a letter, that should tell you that, well, this cannot even be viewed from partisan lens. This is not about just MPP.
In some more stories, a legal researcher and academic, Elom Kwame Goni, has sued the Attorney General and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He's asking the court to declare that the 2-month legal vacation observed by the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court is unconstitutional. The case was filed under Articles 2, Clause 1, and 130, Clause 1 of the 1992 Constitution, which allows any Ghanaian to ask the Supreme Court to interpret and enforce the Constitution. In Ghana, the Superior Courts go on an annual legal vacation from August 1 to September 30 every year. During this period, the High Court does not close completely. It sets up special vacation courts to hear only urgent cases. But the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court do not sit at all. No appeals, no constitutional cases, and no applications are heard for the whole 2 months. This means that anyone with a case at the Supreme Court, at the Court of Appeal, or the Supreme Court must wait until October, no matter how urgent the case is. Mr. GHOne argues that this practice causes unnecessary delays and blocks people from getting justice on time. He says it violates several rights guaranteed by the 1992 Constitution, including the right to a fair hearing within a reasonable time, the right to fair administrative justice, the right to enforce human rights and appeal, the duty of the judiciary to administer justice at all times. The rule that discretionary powers that must be exercised fairly. According to him, the practice affects people who need urgent help from the courts, especially those seeking to enforce their fundamental human rights or file appeals. Communications, Felix Kwachofosu, says calls for Ashanti Regional Chairman Bernard Entry-Besiako, popularly known as Chairman Wontumi, to apologize to President John Dramani Mahama in order to seek clemency are misplaced. Speaking in an exclusive interview with GHOne News, he says although Chairman Wontumi may have gone too far with some of his comments about the president, his remarks have nothing to do with the charges for which he was prosecuted and convicted. He added that President John Dramani Mahama cannot simply order his release, as presidential clemency must follow due process.
I was a bit taken aback myself. I said, wow. But the judge was left a little choice. In fact, the minimum the judge can give was, 15 years?
Yes.
And then the highest is 25. 25 years. Yeah. So clearly the judge's hands were tied. It's regrettable, it's unfortunate. But that is what the law prescribes if you engage in certain activity. There are those who have claimed that, including Wontumi himself, that, if he apologizes to President Mahama, he could be. You see, that is not the case. President Mahama is a politician of many years' experience, vastly experienced. He understands that in politics there's verbal jousting. People say things, you also say things. Yeah. We all know that Wontumi went too far in some instances, but it has nothing to do with this case. Indeed, on the charge sheet that was sent to court against Wontumi, there was nowhere that insults were tabled as part of the charges. So it has nothing to do with what he said about President Mahama. It has to do with illegal mining, so to speak. So I don't think that those calls are properly grounded. In any event, as I indicated earlier, the president does not have the liberty to decide that this and that person should be freed from, unless there are extraordinary circumstances beyond those peculiar circumstances. That recommendation has to come from the prison cell. So the president doesn't even know the people personally. He only gets a list and he's told that this and that person has been of good behavior, he's shown remorse, so give him another chance. And then he goes through lawful processes to do that. So it's not that anybody can commit an offense and when the law catches up and they are convicted, then they come to the president to plead. I don't think that we can, it's not a sustainable approach.
The Jatike Center for Human Security and Peace Building is urging the new leadership of the National Security Council Secretariat to prioritize emergency security threats, including violent extremism, organized crime, and communal conflicts. According to the center, the recent reorganization of the Secretariat must go beyond changes in personnel and focus on strengthening Ghana's ability to anticipate and prevent security threats. The center issued the statement following the president's announcement of new appointments and changes at the National Security Council Secretariat, which is aimed at strengthening the coordination and effectiveness of Ghana's national security architecture.
President John Dramani Mahama has approved a major shake-up at the National Security Council Secretariat, with former Chief of Army Staff, Major General Retired William Ayamdo, appointed Deputy National Security Coordinator in charge of operations. The changes, announced by the presidency in a statement issued on Tuesday, 11th August, forms part of a broader reorganization of the National Security Council Secretariat, aimed at realigning key positions within the country's security architecture. Major General Retired William Ayamdo has been appointed Deputy National Security Coordinator in charge of operations, while former National Security Coordinator Yao Donko has been reassigned to the Office of the National Security Advisor as Director of Intelligence and Research. Adam Saka, Director of Logistics and Transport, Faustina Efabwedi, takes charge of the Human Security Department, while retired DCOP Peter Ende Kugri becomes officer in charge of the Special Investigations Unit. Meanwhile, ACP Al-Hassan Osman has been reassigned to the Ghana Police Service for further deployment, bringing his current assignment at the National Security Council Secretariat to an end. Meanwhile, the Jatike Center for Human Security and Peacebuilding has welcomed the changes, but says the new leadership must focus on emerging security threats. It is particularly warning about violent extremism and possible terrorist spillover from the Sahel, while calling for stronger intelligence gathering, border surveillance and regional cooperation. The centre is also urging greater attention to chieftaincy, land and communal conflicts, organised crime, money laundering and illicit financial flows. It says the success of the reorganisation should ultimately be measured by the ability of the security architecture to anticipate threats and protect citizens while respecting the rule of law.
In some more stories, a 45-year-old man has been arrested after allegedly killing his wife at Esikuma Enyikwoji in the GHOne district of the Eastern region. The shocking incident has left residents traumatized, with community members now calling for greater attention to mental health support and early intervention.
The incident reportedly occurred in the early hours of Wednesday, August 12. The suspect, identified as Doji, allegedly attacked his wife, Lydia, resulting in her death. Residents say the suspect has a history of mental health challenges and had previously received treatment. However, police investigations have yet to establish the circumstances that led to the fatal incident.
I had a call from one of the youth committee members that someone was trying to use so I have to come and see what is happening. And which is so the police for now arrested. So we are waiting for the chiefs and the rest to come.
The suspect was arrested by the local police shortly after the incident, following distress calls from the neighbors. The deceased body was conveyed to the Akosomo Government Hospital for preservation and autopsy. Police say investigations are ongoing to establish the full circumstances surrounding the killing and determine whether anyone else was involved. The couple have reportedly been together for over 2 years before the tragic incident. The incident has sent shockwaves through Esikuma Enyekwoji, with residents calling for stronger community-based mental health support and early interventions for people experiencing mental health difficulties. Police are appealing to anyone with information that could assist the investigation to come forward.
Let's get some answers. George Lawe is with Media Anna FM from the region and joins us for some more updates. George, many thanks for joining us. What new information are you picking up with regard to this incident?
Okay, so now the police have conveyed the body to Akosomo for the autopsy. And the family of the lady, the lady is a stranger in the community here. So the family too, the police have informed the family. So the deceased family too is coming to the police station so that they will, the both families will see that, then they will dialogue what's next. But the suspect now still at the police custody.
We understand from the reports that the suspect has been battling with some mental health issues. Has that been established?
Yes, that is what we have. But the police, for now, they have not confirmed. But according to the suspect's mother, that's what he told us, that the suspect have been discharged from the mental hospital 2 months ago.
Right. But with this particular incident, we understand that they've been married for 2 years. When the incident was happening, were there no community members around, or it happened late in the night?
It happened late in the night, around 8 p.m. after both came from an evening service yesterday night. And according to the mother, they have not heard any noise. So we suspect that the disease was sleep before the suspect have murdered her. Either he used something to hit her before getting access to behead her.
But George, finally, you said that the suspect is now in police custody. Do we know whether the police is going through some mental rehabilitation, or what is happening with the suspect? Because if he's battling mental health issues, definitely he has to be that has to be ascertained by a medical professional.
Actually, yes, by a medical professional. But actually, to me, after I've seen the suspect, by the time the police came for the suspect, I have not seen that, somebody who's mentally challenged. So they have some characters that they prove, but I have not seen some of that sign. And so the mother said it is mentally, is battling a mentally challenged.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. That was George Lawe, who is with Media Anna FM from the Eastern region. Let's do business now.
The Business Brief is brought to you by CompuGhana, passion for technology.
Eight communities in the West Gonja municipality of the Savannah region now have access to electricity following the commissioning of a new power project by the Deputy Minister for Energy and Green Transition. The initiative forms part of government's drive to achieve universal electricity access by 2030. Here's a report by Salif Adam.
For these women, the journey to Ghana was supposed to be a chance to escape poverty. They were promised legitimate jobs, but according to...
For these young farmers, the fertilizer could mean healthier crops, higher yields, and more food for
years. That has changed. The Deputy Minister for Energy and Green Transition, Richard Jamensa, commissioned electricity projects in 8 communities, bringing power to hundreds of homes and businesses. The beneficiary communities include Seiri, Biri Frafra, and Attributo, where residents say electricity will improve education, healthcare, security, and economic activities.
We are so happy that they've come to commission the light for us. I think it will go a long way to serve the community. And in terms of health, it's going to help us to deliver quality of healthcare to the people.
But they still hope more because some of their brothers at number 4 and number 5 are still waiting for you.
The projects form part of government's Big Push infrastructure program, which seeks to extend electricity to more rural communities.
Even in the various district assemblies, we have something we call the legacy project that we are continuing. And that is what we have also done today in terms of the electricity. So I want to urge everyone here, when we connect the electricity, we all have a shared responsibility.
The Deputy Minister announced that more than 159 communities across the Savannah region are expected to benefit from ongoing electrification projects as government works towards achieving universal electricity access by 2030. He added that over 600 million Ghana cedis has been allocated to expand electricity infrastructure across the region.
It costs the government to actually bring the electricity here. The generation also, it costs government, and we have to pay so that we can continue to enjoy the electricity that we have always wished to have. This electricity that we have got today, it is to help improve our livelihood.
The Savannah Regional Minister, Salisu B. Eweribi, described the initiative as a major step toward reducing development inequalities